Welcome everybody to look at another new Imprint release, and it is 1970s The Liberation of L.B. Jones. So this is directed by William Wyler, who had quite an extensive career. Unfortunately, I've not seen all of his well-known classics like Ben-Hur or The Best Years of Our Lives, but I have seen 9 of his films, and favourites being the likes of The Desperate Hours and The Big Country. So this is a neo-noir drama, clocking in at 103 minutes long. Has quite an ensemble cast with the likes of Lee J. Cobb, who I've seen in 14 other films, favourites being the likes of 12 Angry Men, On the Waterfront, and The Day of the Owl. Then you've also got Anthony Zerbe, who I've seen in 13 other films, favourites being from him the likes of The Dead Zone, License to Kill. He was the guy that got probably the most gruesome death in any of the Bond films, as his head was exploded, and as well as the Molly Maguires, which was also released at the same time as this, and I think that was also a Imprint release. You've also got Roscoe Lee Brown, who was in another Imprint release in the form of Uptight, and as well as Twilight's Last Gleaming. We also got Barbara Hershey, who was in 3 of the Insidious films, as well as The Entity, which is basically a far more grown-up version of Poltergeist, and Falling Down. And finally, Yaphet Kotto, who I've seen in 14 other films. He was also a villain in a Bond film in Live and Let Die. He was also in Midnight Run, Alien, Across 110th Street, Blue Collar, and Truck Turner, which is probably one of the best of the blaxploitation films of the 70s. So, yeah, a successful African American businessman has a quarrel with a white policeman, suspecting that he is having an affair with his wife. The policeman's colleagues are seeking to avoid publicity, and that's purely because the policeman's white, the wife is black. Interracial relationships, even back in 1970, were very much, not looked at in a positive manner. So that's where a lot of the conflict comes from. And after watching this, I was really surprised to read that this had a mixed reception upon its release, with one critic even going as far to call this an interracial sexploitation film, which quite frankly is baffling because there really isn't any sex in this at all. And even though its themes could be more hard hitting, they are still effective, which certainly contribute to this not being a shallow effort. And if they're effective now, but I imagine 55 years ago they would have been even more effective, given civil rights was still a hot topic issue, and you know people were still fighting for their rights, and there was still a whole heap of racism back in 1970. Obviously, it's not much better now, but it was perhaps even worse back then. So yeah, I don't feel like it's a very shallow effort like a sexploitation film would be, regardless of whether or not there's actually any sex in this, which there really isn't. The most nudity you actually get, I feel, is the scene where you know the wife is being met up with the cop. You don't actually see them have any intercourse or anything like that. So yeah, it's just really rather baffling to call it that. And I imagine some of the mixed reception was because it's William Wyler's last film. He had obviously quite a long filmography, made many great films. So, yeah, maybe this was just seen a little bit of as a downer in terms of his general directorial efforts. But for me personally, it's one of his ones that I've really enjoyed just as much as some of his other ones. So, yeah, no issues at all in terms of what he's done in terms of the directing. The cast is also excellent. The pacing is on point. It is engrossing throughout, the score is great, the cinematography is well done, and its condemnation of racism and misogyny are commendable from today or even way back in 1970. So, yeah, it's a nice enough release. This it's just a shame though that there is an issue in terms of the extras or the lack of extras. So, yeah, which we'll get to in a second. But there's a disc. So yeah, unfortunately, there are no extras on this one. Swashbuckler at least had a trailer. This doesn't even have that, unfortunately, as you can see. So yeah, that's a little bit of a shame, given that obviously there's a lot of elements to talk about with this in terms of William Wyler or the themes that are presented. I do imagine that most of the people that were involved in this are now no longer with us. I'm pretty sure Barbara Hershey's still alive though, but maybe it's so long ago that she probably can't even remember anything about it. It is obviously more than half a century ago. So, yeah, but regardless, it is a great shame that there isn't more on this because, yeah, but maybe there is just isn't any archival stuff about this film. It doesn't seem to have performed particularly well at the box office at the time. Like I said, it had a mixed reception at the time as well. So yeah, just maybe there isn't really anything to glean from archival, elements out there. So yeah, which is a great deal of a shame because I feel like this is highly underrated as far as films go from the 1970s. Does seem like a bit of a precursor to the black exploitation genre, although obviously this is not the first film to deal with racism, especially when it comes to the police force. Obviously, In the Heat of the Night preceded this by a few years. So yeah, but still solid effort. 4 out of 5. Highly recommend seeing it if you haven't already. But if you have seen it, I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. But nonetheless, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.